What is going on, everybody? It's Brendan Abin coming to you with the KBR Sports, the best sports podcast of your 24-hour day. I'm happy to have you all join me for today's podcast. I'm excited to talk about a good amount of stuff for today's podcast. Whenever I get the opportunity to do the podcast, obviously I think it's a blessing every single time to have the chance to do what you love doing. And for me, it's definitely talking about sports and just kind of giving my perspective on different sports takes for you all. And I always love doing that every single time I get the opportunity to do so. So it's always a privilege. And the fact that for those of you who tune in to listen to the podcast each and every time you do, that's also appreciated as well. Because, yeah, I can talk into a microphone, but it's also more of a fulfilling feeling that you all receive all that I have to say in the preparation and the direction that I decide to go with every single podcast. That's very appreciated as well. So I hope you guys don't take that for granted, because I always do appreciate that. And just want to let you guys know that moving forward, whenever you guys have the opportunity, make sure you go and follow and subscribe to the KBR Sports Podcast on Spreaker, YouTube, iTunes, and SoundCloud. That way you'll get notified whenever the KBR Sports Podcast is posted like this one, or when it's streaming live. Or you can also go and follow the KBR Sports Twitter page at KBR_sports, as well as my Twitter at Abin Brendan at ABBANBRENDAN. So that way you guys can stay up to date on my thoughts on different sports topics and the KBR sports updates they give you from the previous day from beforehand as well. And make sure you guys comment, leave a like, subscribe, whatever, leave a rating. Make sure you guys interact somehow, because I always do want to keep you all involved. I don't want it to feel like it's a one-way street. It's a podcast, yeah, and I'm talking into a microphone and everything like that. And unless I have a guest or I'm hosting somebody, I am just mostly interacting with myself. I want to feel like I'm interacting back with you all. I want to feel like I'm actually talking to an audience. When I see the comments, when I see the feedback, then I get your takes on what I'm saying, whether you agree or you disagree. And I think that's healthy for podcasts, because then you kind of take in the criticism or the praise, whichever one it is, and you get to see different perspectives, even varying from your own. And I think everybody needs a dosage of that in everyday life. So definitely go and make sure you guys do that. Leave a comment and leave a rating on the podcast. But hopefully everybody enjoyed themselves over the Thanksgiving break. Everybody has enjoyed the fulfilling amount of sports topics that we've gotten and sports news that we've been blessed with over the past few days, honestly, because I feel like with the NFL, the NBA, so much has been going on in both leagues that you feel like there's a concurrent amount of things to talk about and amount of topics that you can't touch on in a single podcast, and it feels like it takes days sometimes, or it can even take an hour to 2 hours of recording to touch on. But most times I try to keep it within a certain time frame, because I know not everybody wants to sit down and listen to a podcast for an hour. Some people do, some people don't. And sometimes if you condense it for people, it makes it easier for them to be able to tune in. And not that I shortchange you all on what I have to say. I always try to make sure I'm laying out everything that I can say in a full podcast, but I try to make sure that it is time efficient, so that way I'm covering the meat of what needs to be talked about, at least for what I think I want to cover and what I feel as though is the most interesting thing in which people want to hear about. So definitely, if you guys ever have a question about formatting, how I do this and everything like that, that's some of the background into it. And if you want longer podcasts, let me know. I obviously can talk about sports all day, and I don't mind doing long podcasts and doing longer recordings, and this, even if it involves bringing a different guest on or something like that, let me know. And I'll be sure to make sure I'm trying my best to improve the podcast in that way for you all that tune in regularly. And for going towards the topics I wanted to talk about, I wanted to touch on just narratives in the media in general, because I feel like coming out of this weekend, there have been a lot of narratives. And for me, it's funny how much we let narratives influence us, especially when it comes to our perspectives. The national media has framed our thoughts on a lot of topics recently, and I want to show y'all just how murky it can be, especially when it comes to a notable head coach and a star quarterback pairing that have been under the microscope recently in the media. So let's do a recap of some of this duo's achievements and their faults. So they've led multiple top 10 offenses during their time together. They have multiple division crowns, so they've been the top team in their division for multiple years, and they have won a Super Bowl together, which is the peak achievement in the NFL. And during their tenure together, the quarterback is one of the greatest to ever play the game, and he's also one of the best in the game currently, arguably the best quarterback. You can make a lot of arguments that he's the best quarterback, and arguably you can honestly frame an argument where he should be the MVP this season. And both have had great success with working with one another, but not without their own fair share of drawbacks. They have underachieved in line with expectations for a Hall of Fame quarterback, a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, and a highly regarded coach, especially when you're stacking them up against the likes of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I mean, there were multiple seasons where they did not make the playoffs and not been back to the Super Bowl since they won it. And while the surrounding talent has been in question at times, whether it's like the lack of a defense, the lack of a running game, whatever the case may be, it doesn't explain this long of a Super Bowl drought with the MVP caliber quarterback performing at a high level. It is a black mark that still holds this duo in Drew Brees and Sean Payton back from being held in the same regards to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Now you see how narratives frame things, right? I bet you thought I was talking about Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy, right? Because all we've heard about in the media is about how bad of a play caller Mike McCarthy is, how bad that team has looked, how Aaron Rodgers hasn't looked the same, and yada, 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 yada. And how this team needs to have some change, how it's uncreative or it's not innovative in terms of how their offense plays. But one thing I like to keep in perspective for everybody is it's all about timing and just what the overall narrative is. Because if you look at that pairing, they're a pairing that has made it to the playoffs 8 of the 10 years that Aaron Rodgers has been a starter and won the division title 5 times, along with Aaron Rodgers winning 2 MVPs and being named an All-Pro twice during that time period. While the season's struggles have led many to believe that Mike McCarthy should be fired, his time with Aaron Rodgers isn't all too different than Peyton and Drew Brees' time together. I mean, they both have winning percentages in the regular season. They both have winning percentages in the postseason. So it's not like Mike McCarthy is losing more than he's winning in the postseason. He's winning games in the postseason. It's just that they get to the postseason and they can't end up getting to the Super Bowl. They don't end up getting past the NFC Championship game, or they get to the NFC Championship and then they just end up losing. And so when we're looking at, Mike McCarthy, look at his regular season win percentage, 62.1. Okay, now let me reflect that back on a Sean Payton, who many right now would probably say there's no way Sean Payton should lose his job. But there was a time period, I don't know if everybody remembers this, there was a time period when people were calling for Sean Payton's head. And that was especially during the Bountygate scandal when all that stuff was going down. And people were wondering what's going on this team. Because remember, the Saints went 7-9 for 3 consecutive seasons. 3 straight years, 2014, 2015, 2016. And there were so many times during that time period where people were saying, oh, has Sean Payton lost his touch? Have he and Drew Brees fallen off? Is Drew Brees still that same guy? Or they would say, the narrative was that all they had was Drew Brees and there was nothing else to that team. And that team needed so much more in order to be a playoff caliber team, and that it was on Sean Payton to get him that caliber of team. That team, they had to build that team because it had been too long that you can't waste Drew Brees' prime, sound familiar, and not capitalize on the ability that he has and how good of a quarterback he is, and not result in getting to 1 Super Bowl since 2009. So we just got to really pay attention to how media framing works in so many situations of our perspectives of football. Like, I bet so many people think Mike McCarthy should get fired. And granted, they didn't make the playoffs last year. They didn't, and they were terrible without Aaron Rodgers. They were really bad. But before Aaron Rodgers got hurt, they made the playoffs for literally every single year. There was a time period when before Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and when you're looking at this team was the number one. They were the top team in that division for 4 years straight. At one point, they finished the number 1 seed in that division for 4 years straight. Now you could put it on the fact that the rest of the division was lackluster and so on, or whatever your reasoning may be, but they either finished first or second for at least 7 to 8 straight years. That's impressive, guys. That is really impressive. And I know they've fallen off to some degree, but everybody has noted that Aaron Rodgers sustained an injury earlier in the season. and that he hasn't looked like the same exact Aaron Rodgers with his injuries. And what is a lot of what the Packers system is? It's a lot of what Aaron Rodgers is able to do, creating for himself, creating once the play breaks down and making people miss, making people have to work to take him down, making the extra pass that nobody's able to make because he's able to move around and extend plays longer than anybody else because he's just Aaron Rodgers. So now we're ignoring the fact that one of his key traits, and what is a big pivotal reason why their offense is how it is that Aaron Rodgers' legs aren't the same. But we're neglecting that, and it seems like now I will say, Mike McCarthy and them, there's no excuse for the defense not being what. After all these years of saying the defense needs to be this, the defense needs to be that, the defense needs to be that, the defense needs to be better. I mean, they're one of the top teams in sacks. Don't get me wrong. They're able to get sacks and stuff, but you have to be able to stop teams from scoring and from just being able to move the ball up and down the field on a consistent basis. And their run game has gotten a lot better. I mean, their running back averages over north of 6 yards per carry, probably over 5 yards per carry, if I was to guess. So when we're looking at how this team plays and just the different nuances that go into how a team's supposed to look healthy, how the team runs this and that, I don't think that we can all just get our pitchforks ready and call for Mike McCarthy's job. Because I know it's been a long time to go without getting to a Super Bowl, at least, without getting to one Super Bowl. But you could say the same thing for Drew Brees and Sean Payton. If anything, couldn't you be more mad that they had a complete team last year and that they lost to the Minnesota Vikings off of the Minnesota Miracle, mind you, but they still lost before they even made it to the NFC Championship? Couldn't you make that case? Because it's when you have a reason for not being able to make it, it's more explainable when you have the complete team. Like, the Saints are arguably the most complete team in the NFC right now. The Rams are banged up on that defensive side of the football, so they're not as complete as the Saints on offense and defense. They have Drew Brees in the passing game. They have Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram in the running game. They have those defensive guys on the other side of the ball that are able to lock up anybody, or at least not even specifically lock up, but get stops when they need to. That's the big key about the Saints team. They're able to get stops now when they need to. And that's what the NFL game is all about. Go out, score the other guy, but make sure you can stop them when it counts. And that Saints team is able to do that. They have the talent to do that. Yet they lost last year off of a broken defensive play. So I really think that we should start looking at how we're letting the media frame a lot of our perspectives on these players, and if we feel like certain guys should be losing their jobs, if we feel like certain guys should be getting ready to get fired, all that stuff. Because while everybody's saying that Mike McCarthy's time is up, and granted, I don't know the relationship. Everybody says the beat writers there would know it better, but I do hear that the relationship between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy isn't as strong as the relationship between like a Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And Sean Payton is an exceptional play caller. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to put Mike McCarthy on Sean Payton's level, but if we're looking at it, they both have the same level of achievements, at least the achievements that everybody cares about, which is a Super Bowl ring. Now, Sean Payton obviously has led multiple top 10 offenses, which is something Mike McCarthy hasn't done. Sean Payton, his offenses have been revolutionary in terms of the passing attack and compiling that with the running game and stuff like that, and how he's always been able to make sure his offenses were a top 10 offense every year. But I'm just saying, all that stuff sounds good and dandy, but at some point it has to result in a ring. And for Sean Payton, they went multiple years where they didn't even finish over 500. With Drew Brees being healthy. Now Mike McCarthy has one season where Aaron Rodgers was hurt, and then now he's having another season where they're not playing their best and he's gimpy, and we're already calling for his job. I don't know, man. I just feel like there should be more perspective to it than that. But hey, maybe that's just me. I feel as though if you feel as though that you picked the Packers to make it far in the playoffs before the season, and then Aaron Rodgers' injury happened, and then if he was a different player than what you felt like he was going to be coming into the season, then why doesn't that give Mike McCarthy more time? I don't know. Like I said, maybe it's just me, but let me know what you think. Give me your comments. Do you think Mike McCarthy, his time is up in Green Bay? Do you think management's going to see it the same way as the media sees it? Because a lot of times media pressure can influence management decisions. So leave your comments and your reviews on the podcast. I want to definitely get you all positions on this and get your thoughts and opinions. So make sure, guys, you subscribe, you on Rabble, Spreaker, YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Leave a rating, all that. Make sure you follow the Twitter pages at Abin Brendan, which is my Twitter page, and at KBR_sports, where you all can check out all the different perspectives on the sports topics. And I'll talk about things like this all the time. I give my thoughts on NBA, NFL, college basketball, college football, the MLB, the whole line. So make sure you guys check everything out, and make sure you guys tune in. I want to hear back from you all. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of the day.